is leaving, and Jennifer will be looking to step into our alternate position. So you guys have all seen the updated membership composition, and I did get a chance to finally sit down and talk to Audra about budget. And so she is, as we know, they've kind of revised how they're doing the annual committee budget. So they're not allocating a certain dollar amount each year going forward to each committee, and rather they're kind of taking everything and just putting it across. Printing costs are allocated for the town itself, and then each committee just falls under that. So anything that comes up for us is not something that we have a set amount of money operating budget. It's rather on a kind of per basis. So basically, if we have any kind of substantial expense, we kind of have to be able to forecast for it and then go to either the select board or go to Audra and apply for it. They are currently putting together their budget for 26. So we're going to be having to kind of look out and forecast and get some kind of a projection to her. I don't know, right, sitting here now, what kind of things are going to come up for us that year. It's and that's what I kind of talk to her about is forecasting those kinds of things. I think most of those expenses that would be more than nominal would be in the consulting area. And so I talked to her about foreseeable consultancy, which she seemed to think were reasonable, but we're going to have to put some specific dollars down and submit them. This year, I would see some consultancy potentially around the drafting of the ordinance. Perhaps down the road, if we were adding a historic district like Elm Street, there might be a survey cost around that or consultancy around that. But right now, I don't see any budget issues in the next month or two, but I think there's, things that we're going to have to be asking for down the road. She also let me know that there's a committee handbook that I had really just recently received a copy of that addressed a lot of these kind of budget discussions, and also lays out the fact that we need a chair, vice chair, and secretary, which we have kind of informally followed, but we haven't formally elected those positions. So I think in June, when we kind of naturally run to our term limits, it would be an appropriate time for us to hold that quote unquote election or appointment of those three positions. And we're going to have some membership turnover in June with, I can't remember if Chris or some terms come to an end in June. So yeah, so there will either be renewal of those positions or we'll be replacing with new members in June. So that's down the road as well. I got an email which shocked me from about our national natural landmark. So after months of trying to make headway on that issue, I finally got a response and I couldn't believe it. So I've actually received the proposal or the application from the Department of the Interior. So it's a 19-page document about how to apply for that. So I'm just starting to kind of go into that and see if the harbor qualifies. Most of the criteria centers around species, unique species in the, in the designation. So we may or may not qualify, but I'm looking into this and I'll update you more on this. But I also printed out that currently these are the existing main natural landmarks. So you get some kind of idea of currently what holds that designation. And we would definitely be an outlier, but I think a case can be made to add the Camden Harbor, especially with Curtis Island and some of the features and history of that spot. I'm hoping that that is something that we can move forward with. So I will give you more information on that after I review the application. Um, the annual report is due soon. So I've been going through our meeting minutes and kind of pulling out accomplishments to send to Janice about what we did this last year. Our biggest accomplishment is obviously getting what we achieved in November on the warrant. But I wondered if we want to include any kind of group photo. That is, I don't think that's something that has been in the annual report before, but I thought that would be kind of a fun thing if in our next meeting to take a group photo and include that in the annual report. So I don't know, come wearing your Sunday finest next meeting and we'll take a group photo. And if anybody has a specific accomplishment or a specific thing they want included in the annual report, please email me that and I'll fold it into what I send off. I think that might be all I wanted to talk about. I know in my email out to you, I talked about kind of 25 goal setting, another project for us to take on other than the historic preservation ordinance, which we'll talk about later. But so I'll save both of those things for later. But right now, why don't we move on to the select board liaison, and Ken, if you have anything to report.
First, I just want to ask a question about the budget, just to clarify. So for office support, it's just built in. You're a committee, you get office support from the town, so you don't have to budget for that.
Yeah.
And for build or contemplated or projected events, subscriptions, you have to make fill out an application per.
So for our ongoing membership to organizations, I think that will be pro forma by the town as well as any kind of administrative support.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to something like a consultant or what have you, we're going to have to go to the select board for that. And I think the most immediate possible thing around that is around deconstruction, because I think we would like to find a way to involve Danny's recommendation of Sarah as we kind of formulate policy around deconstruction. So that's really the thing I see on the horizon.
And possibly a more consultant for the ordinance itself.
I think at this point, we're going to be able to do most of that internally. And then as it comes to executing the preservation ordinance, the idea would be that the applicants on each review would take on the cost of that consultancy if the commission required outside consultancy. So we would hire and then be, compensated for that. The town would be compensated.
Yes, thank you. No, I don't have anything to add. The MRCAC, you've got the MRCAC in Montgomery Day here. The MRCAC is meeting. I think they're hoping it's to be their final meeting to put the final touches on their report on Wednesday of this week so that they can get it in the select board's hands before the select board meets a week from tomorrow. I think that's where they're at. And I don't know if how it will appear on the select board agenda as an action item or a discussion item or how it will be. But that's how I understand the upcoming sequence of events.
Yeah, that's my understanding too. Audra was saying that they would be presenting kind of the final option to the select board. So I'm very interested in that. Yeah.
Would there be any money required for historic documents? There's some talk about another project here about how do we control and manage historic documents and
I mean, archiving and what have you? Or?
Yeah, archiving and identifying them. And
I think we first have to decide on the scope of that project and what exactly it is we want to do before we can go asking for that money. But I mean, you're right to raise that because that is a potential huge dollar item, and that would fall fiscal year 26. possibly, but we don't know what that is yet.
Yeah, we haven't
Yeah.
really defined it, yeah.
But I mean, I feel like that's something that has been kicked down the road for a long time now, and not because nobody's interested in it, because it's really hard to figure out what our starting point is.
So
And
I think I saw something maybe that you had read, but getting together with Camden Rockport Historic Society and, okay, so that was just sort of planning, thinking about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, I mean, it has been months of me, I think, asking the group, should we have this meeting? And not actually pulling it together. I think everyone has had a lot of different priorities, but I think that's the obvious starting point, is to get all four of those groups together, which I don't think is going to be easy, but I think until we've done that, we have no idea where that conversation is going to go.
And then something like that may lend itself to a grant as well. You know, I think it's anything that really super saves the history
Yeah,
is something that's,
yeah,
there may be resources out there, so.
I agree.
Okay,
Um,
thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Is there anything else to report from the select board, Ken?
No.
Okay. All right. Moving on. So new business. Let's talk about the historic preservation ordinance. So we just had an hour-long meeting with Shenley about where we are with the historic preservation ordinance. And I sent you an email with kind of updates on the ongoing conversation, and we kind of went through those, but the big discussion points were really more around timeline and deconstruction. So what we decided in terms of timeline is that she's going to incorporate all the edits we've talked about by February 24th. So we should get a draft document that is a revision of the document we've already created. And then I would like us to have a meeting just specific to that document in the days that followed, so the 25th or 26th. And then that will then go to the planning board on March 3rd, on their meeting on March 3rd, to get their input. We'll get their revision, their notes, and we'll incorporate it into the document. And then we hopefully take that to the public, I think in the beginning of April. And between March 3rd and let's just call it April 3rd, where we go to the public, I would like to lean on Brian and his resource, Stu, about having a meeting preparing for that public conversation and answering tough questions and really kind of getting our public-facing Q&A prepared. And at those public workshops, what I'd like to do is do something similar to what we did with the select board, where we kind of walk through the intentionality of why we're doing a historic preservation ordinance, what specifically we're saving, what the benefits are, and really dovetail that to also a presentation from Danny about deconstruction, sustainability, the economic benefits, all that around reuse. So I'd like to make that presentation to the public, then take their input and really start to make this a stakeholder involved discussion, so that come July, we can present to the select board with something where we have public support, business support, and internal support from the planning board. So that's kind of like the broad timeline. So I'd like to check with you all about availability on either the 25th or 26th. Is that something where people would be able to make time for a meeting on that? Because I really love to, move forward. So we're talking about either a Wednesday or a Thursday. And I can just circulate an email and get everybody to, respond later if that's easier. But just off the top of my head, does one of those days work better for group members?
Sorry,
It'd be Wednesday the 26th or Thursday the 27th.
Either. Would this be the plan for that?
What's that?
The plan for that, for the public facing?
No, this would be a meeting to review Shenley and Jeremy's
Okay.
revision of the
Oh,
draft
gotcha. Okay.
document.
I can make either work.
Okay. Why don't we tentatively schedule for the 27th and I'll follow up with everyone. We'll do it after work. So we'll do something like a 4 o'clock or a 5 o'clock. Yeah.
Just a question about, you sent out the original draft of the ordinance,
Yeah.
and then it seems that there were a lot of additions that Jeremy was going to do that now Shenley's going to do.
Yeah.
Well, I can't seem, would it be worthwhile to, there seem to be a lot of revisions. I'd like to review that, myself, but I don't want to review something that's already changed. So I guess I just have to go back to the original one before the changes and.
I have received no updated revisions since what we've submitted to them. So
I
the
saw that.
24th will be like our first look at how they've changed it.
Okay.
So that would give us 3 days to review. Is that not enough time, or is there even input you want to give preceding them continuing to
No,
revise?
if you think that's the body of revisions, then I think I can read the original, read that, and I'll be fine. I just
Okay.
didn't know if there was any other that had happened to change it.
No, and I don't think the real meat of the ordinance is changing. It's more getting language that aligns with state of Maine language or existing code. So and so far, they haven't really given an indication of gutting what we've written. Now, I might be surprised on the 24th, but everything I've seen has been really just rephrasing, and the things you've seen noted in the email. So
Thank you.
it shouldn't be that major.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any more questions around the historic preservation ordinance or concerns or?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, you're adding, for the public hearing, you want to add a discussion of deconstruction, or are you saying it is incorporated in the ordinance and must be discussed? Because if I have a little confusion, everybody's going to have confusion. Are you talking about deconstruction or the ordinance? In other words, if you double up at the public hearing, you're going to cause confusion.
So in the ordinance itself, it already has a nod to deconstruction, like it has a paragraph saying, when practical, reuse these materials and what have you. It's more of a suggestion, right? So what I see the discussion being is, here are the benefits of deconstruction and reuse as a selling point for the overall preservation ordinance, because it kind of dovetails with it, but it is not going to be a separate ordinance or set of regulations around deconstruction. Now, that may be something that as a program develops over the years, that it could be formalized into policy. But at this point, it's more about trying to create inertia or initiative around having homeowners, as they do renovation, to contribute to a deconstruction program or being mindful of that. So it's already kind of in the ordinance, but it's not formalized as policy. Or does that make sense?
Yes, but if you do combine them both on one evening, you want to make very clear that the deconstruction is a concept that you would like to discuss, but it's not a requirement built into the ordinance. I'm trying to avoid people saying, what was that meeting about?
Yeah.
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 Okay, that's a good
I
concern.
see your point, yeah.
Yeah.
That- Mhm.
Okay, well, please take a look at the language that's
Yeah.
in the ordinance already and see if you think it's broad enough. But
Because I think, what he's raising is the fact that people will come away thinking there's a big deconstruction element in the ordinance that we're also going to be demanding deconstruction, and you'd have to make it clear up front that
Mhm.
these are two separate things.
Yeah, no, I agree. We do have to make it clear, but I think on balance, it's going to be a pro.
Yeah.
So I do want that to be part of our presentation about where this is going and as a benefit to the ordinance itself. But you're right. It can't seem like we're
Yeah.
jamming in a whole new set of ordinances or a whole new set of code.
Yeah, I think just to be the deconstruction advocate here,
Yeah.
I think one of the benefits that having, again, not a mandate, but at least some suggestion around deconstruction, how that might benefit the ordinance is, I think a lot of people who are uninformed about what we're doing and just sort of imagine what a historic preservation ordinance would do negatively to this area is that will like restrict us from being able to change and adapt and things like this. Whereas deconstruction is a way to say, okay, well, in certain cases where, we're not preserving a building whole, even though that's always the goal, there's, a sustainable alternative that still preserves elements of these older structures. And I think that's an important point for some people. So
Yeah.
hopefully it will benefit. But I agree with you that it should be clear that it's not, yeah.
Well, I see it as the references in the ordinance should explain the design manual or in the technical papers, and the deconstruction at this time can be a technical papers is used as reference for the restoration and preservation.
Are you suggesting some kind of indexing of what the technical papers will
Well, there's going
be?
to be a number of the design manuals, even though it won't be a design manual, it will reference the Secretary of the Interior's documents and all of that,
Mhm.
because that's how do you restore something.
Mhm.
And that deconstruction would be a major part of that.
Mhm.
With a little more education into historic buildings.
I think that's a good point. Yeah. Thank you. Shall we move on or more around that? Okay. Well, now we're moving on to deconstruction. Do you have anything more you want to add to around that topic right now, or? I thought you said some pretty interesting things earlier. I don't know
Sure.
if you wanna-
Yeah, so a couple things just personally. I am hoping I just put an estimate in for doing the deconstruction of the property on Chestnut Street that can't be preserved, the house from around 1800. So hopefully that can be a demonstration piece. And that would be happening if I were to get this in April. Probably take the whole month. Yeah, is there anything specifically from our conversation earlier that you want me to share?
Well, is the transfer station something to talk about or not?
It's not official yet, but yeah. So I mentioned earlier that that some of the efforts that other cities have made to advance deconstruction had sort of grant programs set up to cover the costs of some like pilot deconstruction projects. And I have a few examples of those here from the city of Portland, Oregon. And they also like documented the process pretty thoroughly and estimated how much of the material was able to be reused and recycled and things like this. So our local transfer station has a grant program set up that's like totally underutilized right now. It's for waste reduction education. And the manager of our waste facility reached out to me about possibly having me and my business do some sort of audit of the transfer station and think about ways they can, through looking at data and collecting data, what are some materials that come through there pretty regularly that would be a good investment for them to start to divert, maybe weave into their swap shop or other ways to create programs around diverting waste. So I'm going to have discussions with him also about possibly maybe doing something like this here.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting that there's a potential way for Danny in some ways to create a little bit of a pilot program at our transfer station that could be kind of a proof point for something to point to as we have these discussions with the public. Okay, so Brian, anything to talk about with social media?
Well, I'd like to be able to do more with that this month with talking with some of you individually, if you've got any projects and maybe get some photos and some interview snippets with you, Danny, and Mike, and
The kind of profile things?
yeah.
Oh,
maybe a
that's cool.
profile. And also, if you have any recommendations just for individual houses that you think would be good to feature,
Hmm.
let me know.
You could pull from our our historic walks.
Yeah.
I mean, I can give you the files and text, like that might be kind of a fun thing.
So, right, so I could take a new photo and then use.
Or
some of
even
the
use
information.
I mean, all most of the photos that we used in creating the map were photos that Tracy and I took.
Yeah.
So we can use those photos and the descriptions that we have. Just kind of like posting things from the historic walk would be kind of a cool way to suddenly have 40 updates that you could just paste over the next few months. So
So do you have those in?
I have all the raw files and everything. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Great.
Yeah.
I might be able to do a little feature for you because a
Okay.
woman recently on Mountain Street applied for a house plaque and she was confused which corner her house was on. She's on the corner of Mountain and Central. And she thought she's on the corner of Mountain and Cross. And she thought she was on Mountain and Central. So she thought she had the Clay House. Well, the Clay House has long ago been moved. It's where the church is now, where the big church is on the corner. And the Clay House is down on C Street. So Rhonda and I met and went through all these deeds, and we're going to meet with her in a couple of weeks, and maybe she'd let us take, feature it as, a story about how sometimes it's not so easy to tell which house you are in, because the former owners told her it was the Clay House from the 1830s or 40s. And so she did all her research, and then she had a big glitch and she didn't know where she was. And it's actually the house that Joshua Bramhall, who was the caretaker out on the island, he owned that house.
Oh, wow.
And that's Ezra's father. So anyway, it might make a good little feature story about and get some more interest in house plaques.
Okay.
What's interesting about that too,
idea.
Pat, what's interesting about that is so many people, when I talk to them, they're like, well, how do I find out about the history of my house? So like hearing that case study
Yeah.
is kind of cool to realize, okay, how do you find
And
it?
when I called to tell her that we had looked at her application and we really needed to come and talk with her, she was like, well, I got this information from the former owner, so we're going to meet with her, and she allowed as to how it could have happened. So
Was this a historic plaque application?
yes, it says, they have a plaque on the house which says the Richard Clay House.
Hmm.
Anybody can buy a plaque.
But she applied for, a Camden
Right.
historic plaque, but she has her own on the house.
It's like
Which, oh my gosh, how do you talk to her about that? Because they already.
bursting a bubble.
I know.
Which house is it?
It's 22 Mountain. So, where the church is, and you keep going up on the same side of the street, and when you get to Cross Street,
Street.
it's the one on the upper side of Cross Street.
Oh, okay.
It's a blue.
Yeah, the blue colonial.
blue house,
Yeah,
yeah.
the,
Yeah, she thought it was the Richard Clay House.
Michael, your Bell story, I think would be a great social
Yeah.
media
Mhm.
story as well.
That's true.
Yeah.
And I wonder, as you're doing Curtis Island Foundation updates, if you want to consider Brian as just another
Yeah.
outlet, because
Yeah.
I'd love to be seeing that kind of connectivity between
Yeah.
what you're doing and.
Today I reposted the Curtis Island Foundation's post about the upcoming workshop.
Oh, thank you.
And you talked to Pat about other articles she's already written about houses.
For the newsletter?
Along
No,
some
you-
old
you've got
ones,
some
yeah.
that are,
Okay,
I think maybe just one every once in a while.
Yeah. okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's a backlog of great stories that you and Rhonda have done. You know, reposting those would be great. You know?
Reposting what?
Like old articles that were in the paper.
Oh.
Like, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
you guys have done a lot of really interesting stories.
Yeah, we should be putting more stuff on social media.
Some of these stories you're talking about are pretty long and involved for social media. Do you guys have some other kind of digital archive where you keep this stuff that people can go find it? Or is it all institutional knowledge, meaning personal heroics?
But you're tapping into exactly.
Well, what we do, with all the ones that we do that for the plaques, for the plaque program, I made copies and gave them to Ken, and he has them somewhere. Oh, I gave you a notebook, didn't I? And they're somewhere in the
History
library.
Center, right.
And I haven't updated the last
We
few.
need a website.
It should be a website.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we need an integrated digital database that feeds the library, the
Yeah.
town, the society, that they're all feeding
Maybe
into
you
one.
could get to it through the library.
That would be the obvious portal.
Yeah,
Yeah, right through the History Center. maybe?
But this is all part of the discussion of
yeah, get it all
how are we
together.
archiving? What are we archiving? Is there physical space, and how does that live digitally? And that feels like a very essential project for this committee. But every time we start talking about it, it's like, oh boy, that's a huge, it's a big
Yeah.
one.
Do you want me to have a conversation with Wyatt and Christy and just see if there's any appetite or interest for some kind of project? I mean, I'm on the library board.
Yeah.
Might as well like use it.
I think that'd be fantastic.
And
We
just
need
see if-
some way to kickstart
Yeah,
this stuff.
interested in even like hosting a little corner that would be historical.
Well, they have, Ken, obviously there is the
stacks.
that whole, and there's the dedicated, what's the name of the room?
The vault.
Yeah, I mean, that vault has all kinds of physical note cards and pictures and
Well, I just think
documents
if
and,
We're creating these stories now, at least start now to
Hmm.
save them somewhere.
Because I put in that notebook, the application and the photos and everything they gave me, the deeds, and each one is a little bit thick, but it could be incorporated on a website a lot simpler,
Mm-hmm.
And then it'd be searchable.
and searchable.
but I thank you very much, by the way, for my little document case that showed up at my house.
I'm sure.
That's the official archive right
So
there.
Chris, see,
And I-
see him, he's got a lot.
See, that's the problem. I still have 2 boxes of historic
Hmm.
resources committee stuff that I just didn't have the heart to dump on you
Yeah.
because it's archival.
Yeah,
So I just picked out the stuff that I thought you needed to work with.
yeah, and
But
isn't
what am
there,
I doing with those 2 boxes?
exactly, and isn't there like 6 boxes somewhere that Will had identified at one point? Like, yeah, I mean, there's just stuff scattered everywhere that's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a problem.
yeah. Anyway, and the historical societies facing their own issues with the deteriorating building. It just feels like there's an overall archiving effort that needs to take place. I mean, that, I think either the library or the historical society are obvious locations for an archive, but it can't just be a room, or it could be now short-term, but there needs to be a real archiving space that's
With the
that's
atmosphere that. will
atmospheric
not-
controls and what have you, yeah. So that, there's money there, but anyway, that's an ongoing discussion, but yes, to your question. Is there anything you want to update us about generally about the historic plaques? I know you're trying to get out of the business of doing that, but are you okay still?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not promoting it and, but I like to see, I just, I got one from the woman on Mountain Street. And then I have 2 that I'm just one I'm waiting for the woman to finish her research.
Mhm.
And then one that was last fall that we've already ordered the plaque, but it takes a long time for Richard to do them. So there are 3 that should be getting plaques sometime within the next couple of months.
Hmm.
That's my report.
And there's no way he can make those in advance, right? Because you have to have specific information for that house on it, right? They have the year. And I was wondering if there's some way to get him to produce some in advance so that we can turn them over quicker, but you can't really do that, right? Because each one,
Can't because the specific dates, I mean. it's
there's
a-
3 different types, right? One does not have a date on it. Isn't that correct?
The one that just has the date on it, we order from New York or someplace.
Oh, okay.
They're the inexpensive ones that the people don't really have.
They just have 1845 or
Yeah.
C with
Yeah.
1845.
Yeah,
They're round.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But because the others are so expensive, they're $160 now. Richard keeps,
Oh, wow.
price keeps going up, so.
But that's
Pretty
not
steep.
bad, I think, for a custom casted.
Maybe we should
single
just
item.
create a brand and just brand the houses. That might be.
Something different altogether. Anyway, that's another day.
Okay. All right. So Curtis Island, Michael,
Yeah,
I know
so-
you've got the meeting this Sunday.
Those around. So we have 2 visioning sessions. One was held last Sunday, a week ago.
A week ago.
And there's one coming up this coming Sunday, and we still have probably a few open spots in it. You know, we can take 36, up to 36 people. And this will tell you how to register for it. So if you haven't registered, please register, otherwise your name won't be there.
So
If
I,
you have registered, that'll be great.
you and Tracy are both attending.
Yeah. I
And
saw
my
that.
son it looks like he's gonna be in town. Do I need to register him or can he just tag along?
I'd
Oh,
register.
okay, I just hate to take a spot, but
We had a few walk-ins last.
Yeah, we had a few walk-ins, but we had a few extra space. It's limited because it's very, we're around table. There will be 8 of us on each table. We've got 5 tables, so kind of a max of 40.
okay.
And then people do individual work, and then they share it around the table. And then at the end, they do kind of their own vision. What would this place be like if you went away and came back in, 5 years? What would you like to be seeing? So what's your vision of how the island is, how it's managed, how, all kinds of questions you can put in. So we had just wonderful participation, and some people shared what they wrote, and they were, it's quite touching and very
Positive.
personal, very positive.
And lots of new ideas too,
Yeah.
which was nice.
So we haven't, and we're going to be doing a summary of those, but we're waiting until we get this next round, and then we'll summarize the whole thing and put out some kind of a report on it. So I think we still have a few positions open coming Sunday. So please, if you haven't registered, do it quickly. Otherwise, we'll say, sorry, you can't get in this time. And if we have more people that we can't take, we'll hold another session. We may plan on holding another session out there. We're also thinking of how do we just kind of get this concept out sort of in the media with enough definition that people could respond to it. Thinking, in fact, of a survey that would kind of take the data that we've collected from this and ask it in more specific questions, but still leave space to write your own thoughts down. So anyway, that's going well. We're continuing to work with Jeremy, and we've had discussions around what do we want to be doing this summer out there. And just today, I'm drafting. We had proposed working on the barn first, getting access and working on the barn first. And I presented that to the select board a few weeks ago, just as we're thinking about, and there was quite a strong feeling like we should not do the barn, or not do it first anyway, and concentrate on what the urgent needs are to keep water out. So I'm in the middle of kind of redrafting a draft of a memorandum of understanding
For a new plan.
for a new plan, which would be very simple. You know, it would deal with the light tower. And what I did, I went back to the big report that we got, and it has, what are the urgent items that we need to take care of? And just focus right on that and focus. There are urgent items on all 4 buildings, but what are the urgent items for the tower and for the lightkeeper's house? And that's where the energy seemed to be with the community and, you know. So I'm moving forward with this. I'm just drafting it, but it's going to deal with the light tower, the house. And for the tower, it's the metal work on the lantern
Yeah.
level. And the house, it's going to be the roof, because I believe more shingles were blown off recently. And I haven't seen pictures yet, but we're going to try to document that. And that's like every year we've lost some. We lost a lot a couple of years ago, but there are apparently more off. So the light,
Access.
oh, yeah, so the house, the main thing is the roof. And if you replace the roof, you've really got to do the trim boards around it and the gutter system. You don't just put a new roof on, it's just going to blow off again.
Yeah.
So we're recommending dealing with the roof and securing the rest of the building for water penetration. So there's no way water is getting in. And then the third area is safe access to the island. And that's, you know, we heard some of that in the visioning session, some ideas around that. So we're looking at what other ways could we access the island than build a major dock system that's going to invite everyone and every boat to stop over and change the island or overpower the ecosystem on the island. So we're looking at that, but that is one of the things that we absolutely need. Right now, there's no safe access to the island. And I've had some meetings today to kind of advance that and look at other ways, using a barge, for example. So that's underway. And the next area was two other things. So the fourth area was liability for the foundation to be involved in this and getting our, working on the island, getting volunteers. We absolutely need the town to work out insurance, because no one on the board wants to accept responsibility for anyone ever getting hurt out there. And so that's a showstopper right there. And the fifth one is the financial strategy. And we know the town is completely inundated with costs, and we think we've got a foundation that's capable of raising money to do this work. And we've had 130 or 40 donors last year, and we've got so we're moving along. We're working on a couple of grants. There are a couple of big grants out there that we'll be tapping into. But what we're saying is the town will donate or give or whatever, somewhere $5,000 to $10,000, and the foundation's going to cover everything else. And it's it's a huge commitment for the foundation, but we need this to move along, and we can't afford to lose another summer on it, because the deterioration is happening faster than we can.
You should clarify 5,000 to 10,000 for this coming year.
Yeah,
That's not a total
Yeah.
commitment.
Oh, okay.
yeah. I mean, the town needs to weigh in some way.
They
So,
chipped
but
in
but it's not,
5,000 last
it's not
year.
$1 million. It's not 500,000. It's every year contribute something and some in-kind. And the in-kind this year would be around the floats and whatever we end up with for plan, possibly using those used floats, repurposed floats. So I don't know if that makes sense. That makes sense to you, Ken?
Yeah.
Can you follow me?
Yeah,
Is the-
sure, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, access. I was going to ask if you had an estimate for the roofing, and roofing is a straightforward problem. It happens everywhere in town, except for the access. That makes it a major project.
Yeah, and access, if in the report that we did, that we're following, and these are the urgent items. A huge amount of the money is around access. And so if we ask every contractor to hire their own access over, it's incredible. I mean, it's like it doubles the cost. And so if we can provide predictable access, that's going to greatly reduce the cost. Plus, we'll be able to get volunteers, and volunteers can do the things that volunteers are capable of doing. And professional contractors will do the work that they need to be doing, especially around brick, rock, metal work. Those are the things that are going to be tough.
So do you anticipate making access good enough for construction equipment to make it just during construction and then reduce it to?
Yes, and that's what we're suggesting. So plan for it during construction and then pull it, change it, repurpose it, sell it, whatever, And then have, again, we still need safe access. And one of the things that we're imagining is some kind of dock there so that a few days every summer, there's a way for the public to get there and transportation over. So people that have never been on the island can get to the island. And
So one of the things, Ken, your question reminded me that one of the things that came out loud and clear was from the visioning session, people wanted a simple access and they wanted the island to stay natural. So that if there was construction, almost everybody said, well, don't put any big stuff out there because after construction, we want that gone. So I don't know.
in terms of the
It's-
access.
They want limited, but accessible. So,
Ultimately.
yeah.
So I thought from these newsletters you've been handing out, I guess I thought access was number one because of contractors and volunteers. So you're going to have some sort of access for that first?
Well, that's
mean,
what I'm
you
trying
really
to say
have to,
now, I
don't
guess.
you?
So of these five, whichever comes first, it's a liability insurance, but access is a big one. We need to define it. We need to get it constructed
Yeah.
and in place. And the other access, that I'm recommending is the beach area where kayakers come in, is that set of stairs be redone. I mean, it was patched together after the storms that wiped out the bottom half of it last year. And so redo that so it's accessible. It may be a long-term, part of the long-term, when any barge or dock or something is pulled back away, that could be long-term with some, design so there are tracks in it too, so you can winch stuff up, for construction, for basic repair, but
Another question I had was, what does the barn actually need?
the barn
I mean,
needs,
is it
the
structurally?
rock foundation needs to be
That's right.
straightened out.
Yeah.
It needs to be lifted, and there needs to be new sills put on it.
Okay.
Everything
I
above the
remember that.
sill is good.
But
I mean-
is it functional, safe and functional for, if you were to do the lighthouse and the house first?
Yeah.
For storage of equipment, because you're going to need somewhere to keep stuff
Mhm.
safe. So
Yeah.
in my mind, I guess it would be number one,
Mhm.
because you need to be able to store.
Well, that was our
equipment
thinking.
first.
There wasn't much support from the select board
Uh-huh,
on that.
all right.
The other thing, I mean, that's why we thought, let's just go and do that. But I think the energy is, we really need to focus on the roof, and we need to
Oh, yeah,
focus
yeah.
on areas that could cause other.
Right.
So I think the barn, we can stabilize, we can use it, as long as it's
Yeah,
safe.
yeah.
But there may be, once we get down to it, maybe there's a tent, some type of a tent structure that goes up that's there for the summer that contractors can leave equipment in. But
It's-
we'll kind of address that as we go on.
Great. That's a great update. So I hope people can go on Sunday. That'd be great. It seems paradoxical or a conundrum. Like I thought this from the beginning that most people want Curtis Island to kind of stay it is and be undisturbed and well preserved. But then without public access and people going to the island and seeing what a treasure it is, there's less public engagement in the island itself. So
So
it's,
I think what we need to do is have a management plan that somehow monitors how many people are on the island at any one time. And I think there's some guidance already of like 45 at any one time, which is quite a
That's a
few.
lot.
But you bring a group of school kids over, you're gonna be in that range.
Are you thinking?
So it's it just needs to be managed and policied. Like you can't drop off boatloads of people to
yeah.
Right.
come over.
Are you thinking about fundraisers for, small fundraisers for your 5 to 10,000 that you want to match?
Mhm.
Or have you got that kind of money or?
The 5 or 10 from the
What-
town? you
From
mean?
from the committee. You said you wanted 5 or 10 from the town, but that you would match it.
Oh,
More than that.
yeah, we'll,
How are you going to raise that?
that'll be 1%. We'll raise 99%. I mean, we're basically, the foundation is saying we think we can raise basically all the money or almost all the money.
For the whole project? Oh, I thought it was like grant.
Well,
plus,
grants will be
any
part of
major
that,
grants.
that'll be part of it.
Okay.
Um,
I have an idea of, share with you some other time. I have to go. Sorry.
well,
Choir
Thank you.
rehearsal.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you, Janet. Okay, so one last item I wanted to talk about is just kind of a vision for the year, a kind of a next project. And I think it makes a lot of sense for that to be this archiving discussion. I mean, as we know from this ordinance, Pat was working on this historic preservation ordinance 3 years ago, and that really was something that was long before that, but really it heated up about 3 years ago, and now it's finally coming to fruition and getting onto the warrant and what have you. And I think the archiving discussion is as big of a project and will be a similar multi-year project. And so if we don't start that discussion and having the preliminary vision setting and brainstorming and what have you, we won't be there in 2 or 3 years from now. So I would personally love to see that as kind of our next big project. I think it's perfect for the group. And I think it's a similar investment of resources and time and what have you. So I'm just curious what the rest of the group thinks about taking on something as monumental as that and pulling together so many vested interests and what have you. Does that appeal to the group? Do people similarly think that would be an important accomplishment for us?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think that could be great. And also it could go well with Danny's idea of exhibit space at the new
Mhm.
Cafe Center, because then
The
there'd
new
be a way
what?
to display. There's going to be a display space at the, what do we call it?
The Villager Cafe.
Villager
Oh, yeah,
Cafe.
yeah.
So that could be a way of highlighting things we discover in the archives.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's a great project. And
Yeah.
10 years
A
ago,
file on it from
Yeah?
5 years ago.
Oh, great.
Writings on it.
So I think just like we did with the preservation ordinance, you just basically rolled up your sleeves and started making it happen. And I think the similar thing has to happen on this. I think we need to have some maybe one-off meetings that are just dedicated to that, where it's brainstorming, thinking about a path forward. Who do we get involved? How do we get them involved? So I think right now, getting the preservation ordinance to the public is like the burning fire. But I think maybe at next month's meeting, if people just kind of percolate on this, we start talking about, okay, let's start having meetings. You can talk to the library and just kind of get a temperature check there, and let's just kind of start that going. But let's be thinking about that as 2026.
Allison is very involved in this. too.
Yeah, she cares about. I'm
Chris,
sure
I
Ken
didn't
would
hear
be on board. Yeah,
What did Chris say?
he's just saying that Allison would be very on board with those efforts, I think. Yeah.
Well, I've just read the Unfinished Love Story, Doris Kearns Goodwin, and she was talking about the 60s, and she
Mhm.
talked about when JFK became president,
Yeah.
he just assigned all these task forces, and it was just brilliant because they didn't, and I think LBJ kept up with it, but they didn't just ask people who were in the Department of Historic Resources or whatever, but they asked outsiders to come in for fresh ideas.
Mm.
So I just wanted to put a little seed out that,
Mhm.
yeah, we could meet as a task force, but I
Mm.
think we need to get some people to join us because we all know how we feel about different things. but
Yeah.
I think we need more input.
What would that look like to you?
Well, the idea of having people from the Historical Society, that's a great idea, but they're kind of the same mindset. I don't know who they are,
Mm.
but they're maybe your neighbor who,
Yeah.
we just say, collar people and say, we have this task force and we have this issue that we're working on and we
Yeah.
need some fresh ideas. And I don't know who they are, but I just love the idea that they didn't just have the people who already were in it.
Yeah.
And especially some space.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Whenever I start thinking about this, I am probably overly ambitious, but I right near my home is the new Bay Chamber building. And whenever I walk by that, I think, wouldn't it be great if there was a historic preservation, I won't call it a museum, but a place where a kind of a living archive where the public can go to and they can access things digitally and physically. And I know that's what the Historical Society kind of is, but I would love for there to be a downtown location that people can walk in, visitors, residents, and what have you, and access easily town history, and also can be kind of a gathering place for community. And I keep thinking about ways to record the histories of living residents who are with us now, who have all kinds of stories to tell, and they're going to be gone and lost. And if there was a location for them to easily share their stories, share those shoeboxes in the attics of photographs, tell their stories and have them be recorded, just, a facility, a
Yeah.
place, that gets me really excited. But I know from watching Michael with everything you're doing with Curtis Island, there's dollars, there's fundraising all around that. But that's kind of where my mind goes we're not just talking about finding a closet somewhere where we can put all our documents or just a database at the library. Like, I kind of want a bigger vision.
There's, on Curtis Island, we have a small subcommittee that's looking at the history.
Mhm.
And a lot of people have indicated they're very interested. So through volunteers and documenting what volunteers are interested in, there'd be probably a group of interested historians. I mean, there's one guy I've met who deals in boats and docking and stuff, and he's fascinated by history.
Mm.
He would bring like you're saying, kind of a different perspective. So there are a lot. I think getting into it, I think it's just sort of framing out big frame, where do we want to go? I'm thinking kind of like what we did. At some point, bringing some people together and having a visioning or thinking session or idea generation, just
Well, that's
brainstorming.
Exactly.
So do a lot of open funnel
Yeah.
stuff before you tighten it down too much.
100%. I also think about identifying a place that exists here in the United States that is like, that's what we want. and then talk to those stakeholders and how they accomplished it and who are the major contributors to that, and have them maybe consult with us or
State
best
archives.
practices. State archives,
State archives. They have
which
all-
I've never visited. Is it in Augusta or is it
Is
in
it open
Portland?
yet? It's been closed for years while they've been remodeling.
The main state museum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it open now?
No, it's not. But
No.
I think it's maybe in the spring.
It's been years.
Yeah.
They have water damage.
They have,
Boiler room at the mill.
Hmm. Anyway,
Get the owner to donate it.
so does anybody have any kind of closing comments, or, we don't know representatives of the public here, so, but yeah,
Quick sort of procedural question.
yes.
So a couple individuals in the area told me that there was a really amazing historic building that they heard through the grapevine the owners want to tear down. I'm wondering what the procedure is for, I mean, they might not even know of the demolition delay. So how does that get flagged? And then how is that brought to our attention?
It all has to go through Jeremy, unfortunately. It filters from him to us, not really the other way around.
But would they know, so like they are trying to get a demolition permit, then they would be notified about it? Wow, that's so late. Okay.
Yeah. And it would comes to us, and then we either approve or put the 120-day delay on. And that's the limit of what we
Right.
can do. Yeah.
Okay. And are they required to come in front of the committee, or could they just say, all right, we'll just wait?
Well, unfortunately, I think some people have not followed the procedure and just done it. But
Right.
but
And what is the
technically they're
penalty for
supposed
that?
to.
It's
Not
probably
nearly
not,
enough.
right? Because,
Yeah.
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 Is this the Main Street building?
No.
What's happened with that? It's still being,
There will be a hearing on February 18th. So that.
You're talking about the commercial.
If you're talking about 39 Main Street.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, there will be a hearing, a judicial format hearing in front of the select board, and the select board will decide whether not to declare it a dangerous building,
Mm.
and then it will be taken from there. That's where it stands.
On the 18th of
February, a week from
coming right up.
tomorrow.
And tomorrow night is the select board meeting?
No.
Oh.
No,
Got-
there is no select board meeting
okay.
tomorrow.
It's the
night.
following
a week
Tuesday?
from tomorrow.
Okay.
It would, right, the hearing would be first, followed by the select board meeting.
Boy, that'll be a long night.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, it'll be a long night.
But next Tuesday is when you should be reviewing the Montgomery Dam option.
Super long night.
That, I don't know how we can do both in one night. Those are both big issues, but I haven't seen the agenda yet.
Okay.
But yes, that is,
That seems like a really good meeting for our members to attend if you
I
can.
thought you were going to say to bring a sleeping bag.
Oh, yeah, that too. Yeah. All right, so again, this Sunday, if you can, for Curtis Island, potentially next Tuesday for,
I had a quick
support, yeah.
technical question, I
Yes.
think, as I was reading the proposed ordinance. So it only applies to historic district or previously designated historic sites.
correct.
What does it take? It sounded to me like it could be very informal. This group could designate a historic district.
No, we'd have to go through the formal application to
application
get,
To
an-
federal designation?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we can't just manifest a historic
Yeah,
district.
it was,
Yeah,
yeah, okay. It was a
Yeah.
little vague.
yeah.
Okay.
No, I think it would, I think it's intentionally cumbersome for us to be able to modify the footprint of the ordinance, because I think the public should know exactly what they're getting into and what we're regulating and what we're not regulating. Even though we have had discussions about Elm Street and Jacobs Ave
Right.
as potential historic districts and have done a lot of research on that, there's still a lot to go with that being formalized, so. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. All right. Do we have a motion to end the meeting? Second?
Second.
All in favor? Good. All right. Thank you very much.
3 months in a row.
3 months in a row?